Hello and welcome to today's episode, which contains following topics: export marketing concept and environment, the exporter and importer, role of exports, scope of marketing, and why should a firm export, trade terms in exporting marketing. Students, since there is a lot to cover, thus we have divided this into 3 parts. The first part has been covered in the previous episode, which included the following topics: export marketing concept and environment, the exporter and importer, the terms related like 4 Ps of international marketing. The second, which we will discuss in today's episode, would have role of exports, scope of exports. The third would finally cover scope of marketing and why should a firm export. We will also cover trade terms in export marketing. Before we go any further, allow me to give you a quick introduction about myself. I am Ms. Pallavi Mohan, working since 17+ years, both nationally and internationally. Worked in 5 countries and studied in 3 countries. Have held leadership positions in the field of marketing, retail, operations, PR and communications. Recent assignment was with Samsung Electronics as corporate communication professional. Students, let's start with understanding some important terms. The term export means shipping in the goods and services out of the jurisdiction of a country. The seller of such goods and services is referred to as an exporter and is based in the country of export, whereas the overseas based buyer is referred to as importer. In international trade, exports refers to selling goods and services produced in the home country to other markets. Export of commercial quantities of goods normally require involvement of the customs authorities in both the country of export and the country of import. The advent of small trades over the internet, such as through Amazon and eBay, have largely bypassed the involvement of customs in many countries because of the low individual value of these trades. Nonetheless, these small exporters are still subjected to legal restrictions applied by the country of export. The theory of international trade and commercial policy is one of the oldest branches of economic thought. Exporting is a major component of international trade, and the macroeconomics risks and benefits of exporting are regularly discussed and disputed by economists and others. 2 views concerning international trade present different perspectives. The first recognizes the benefits of international trade. The second concerns itself with the possibility that certain domestic industries or labor's culture could be harmed by foreign competition. Method of export include a product or good or information being mailed, hand delivered, shipped by air, shipped by vessel, uploaded to an internet site or downloaded from an internet site. Exports also include the distribution of information that can be sent in the form of an email attachment, a fax, or can be shared during a telephonic conversation. National regulations. The export of defense-related articles and services on the United States munitions list is governed by the development of state under the International Tariffs in Arms regulations. The Bureau of Industry and Security is responsible for implementing and enforcing the Code of Federal Regulations, Title 15, Chapter 7, Subchapter C, also known as Export Administration Regulations, in the United States. The BIS regulates the export and re-exports of most commercial items. Some commodities require a license in order to export. There are different requirements to export lawfully depending on the product or service being exported. Depending on the category the item falls under, the company may need to obtain a license prior to exporting. EAR restrictions can vary from country to country. The most restricted destinations are countries under economic embargoes or designated as supporting terrorist activities, including Cuba, North Korea, Sudan, Syria, Iran. Some products have received worldwide restrictions prohibiting exports. If any item would support a proliferation activity such as nuclear, chemical, biological or missile proliferation activities in a country of concern, a license would be required. Part 744 of the Export Administration Regulation spells out the specific regulation related to end user and end use control. There are many prohibited end users. An item is considered an export whether or not it is leaving the United States temporarily, if it is leaving the United States but is not for sale, a gift, or if it is going to a wholly owned US subsidiary in a foreign country. A foreign origin item exported from the United States, transmitted or transshipped through the United States, or being returned from the United States to its foreign country of origin is considered an export. How an item is transported outside of the United States does not matter in determining export license requirement. Refer to US Census data for data of exports by industry for 2013. Canada. Canada Exports and Import Controls Bureau, EICB. Students, however, we will discuss the Indian scenario more. The import or export of any foreign product in India are regulated under the Foreign Trade Development and Regulation Act. Under this act, the central government of India can make the provision for development and also regulates the foreign trade. Also, the central government can prohibit, restrict and regulate the export activities. Under this act, every importer or exporter must obtain an Importer-Exporter Code number, IEC code number, from Director of General of Foreign Trade. Bangladesh, Export Promotion Bureau, Bangladesh. For Australia, Australian Defence Export Control Office, DECO. Let's now discuss the barriers. Barriers. Trade barriers are generally defined as government laws, regulation, policy or practices that either protect domestic products from foreign competition or artificially stimulate exports of particular domestic products. While restrictive business practices sometimes have a similar effect, they are not usually regarded as trade barriers. The most common foreign trade barrier are government-imposed measures and policies that restrict, prevent or impede the international change of goods and services. International agreements limit trade in and the transfer of certain types of goods and information. Example, goods associated with weapons of mass destruction, advanced telecommunications, and also some art and archaeological artifacts. Examples include nuclear supplier group limiting trade in nuclear weapon and associated goods. Currently, only 45 countries participate. The Australian group limiting trade in chemical and biological weapons and associated goods. Missile technology control regime limiting trade in the means of delivering weapons of mass destruction. Tariffs. Tariffs is a tax placed on a specific good or set of goods exported from or imported to a country, creating an economic barrier to trade. Usually the tactic is used when a country's domestic output of the good is falling and import from foreign competitors are rising, particularly if there are existing strategic reasons for retaining a domestic production capability. Some failing industries receive a protection with an effect similar to a subsidy, in that placing the tariff on the industry. The industry is less enticed to produce goods in a quicker, cheaper and more productive fashion. The third reason for a tariff involves addressing the issue of dumping. Dumping involves a country producing high excessive amounts of goods and dumping the goods on another foreign country, producing the effect of prices that are too low. Too low can refer to either pricing the good from the foreign market at a price lower than charged in the domestic market of the country of origin. The other reference to dumping relates or refer to the producer selling the product at a price in which there is no profit or a loss. The purpose and expected outcome of the tariff is encourage spending on domestic goods and services. Protective tariffs sometimes protect what are known as infant industries that are in the phase of extensive growth. A tariff is used temporarily to allow the industry to succeed in spite of strong competition. Protective tariffs are considered valid if the resources are more productive in their new use than they would be if the industry had not been started. The infant industry eventually must incorporate itself into a market without the protection of government subsidies. Tariffs can create tension between countries. Examples include the United States steel tariff of 2002 and when China placed a 14% tariff on imported auto parts. Such tariffs usually lead to filing a complaint with the World Trade Organization, and if that fails, could eventually head towards the country placing a tariff against the other nation in spite to impress pressure to remove the tariff. Subsidies. To subsidize an industry or company refers to, in this instance, a governmental providing supplement financial support to manipulate the price below market value. Subsidies are generally used for failing industries that need a boost in domestic spending. Subsidizing encourages greater demand for a good or service because of the slashed price. The effect of subsidies deter other countries that are able to produce a specific product or service at a faster, cheaper and more productive rate. With the lowered price, these efficient producers cannot compete. The life of a subsidy is generally short-lived, but sometimes can be implemented on a more permanent basis. The agricultural industry is subsidized in countries such as United States, Japan, and many nations located in the European Union. Critics argue such subsidies cost developing nations $24 billion annually in lost income, according to a study by the International Food Policy Research Institute. A DC group funded partly the World Bank. In 2000, the United States spent $32.3 billion on the agricultural industry. The EU spends about $50 billion annually, nearly half its annual budget on its common agricultural policy and rural development. Exports and free trade. The theory of comparative advantage materialized during the first quarter of the 19th century in the writings of classical economists. While David Ricardo is most credited with the development of the theory, James Mill and Robert Torrance produced similar ideas. The theory states that all parties maximize benefit in an environment of unrestricted trade, even if absolute advantages in production exist between the parties. In contrast to mercantilism, the first systematic body of thought devoted to international trade emerged during the 17th and 18th century in Europe. While most views surfacing from this school of thought differed, a commonly argued key objective of trade was to promote a favorable balance of trade, referring to a time when the value of domestic goods exported exceeds the value of foreign goods imported. The favorable balance in turn created a balance of trade surplus. Mercantilists advocated that governed policy directly arrange the flow of commerce to adapt to their beliefs. They sought a highly interventionist agenda using taxes on trade to manipulate the balance of trade or commodity composition of trade in favor of the home country. Export strategy. Export strategy is to ship commodities to other places or countries for sale or exchange. In economies, an export is any good or commodity transported from one country to another country in a legitimate fashion, typically for the use in trade. The four key pillars of a successful export strategy. First, export readiness assessment of a company. Second, export readiness assessment of a product. Third, research of 220 countries and the world's major trade channel to find target markets. Fourth, develop export strategy to enter the selected above target markets that will include such considerations like transport, partnership, key distribution, channel, pricing, volumes, advertising, etc. Advantages of exporting. Ownership advantages are the firm's specific assets, international experience, and the ability to develop either low cost or differentiated products within the contacts of its value chain. The localization advantage of a particular market are combination of market potential and investment risk. Internationalization advantages are the benefits of retaining a core competency within the company and threading it through the value chain rather than obtain to license, outsource or sell it. In relation to the eclectic paradigm, companies that have low levels of ownership advantages either do not enter foreign markets. If the company and its products are equipped with ownership advantage and internalization advantages, they enter through low risk modes such as exporting. Exporting requires significantly lower level of investments than other modes of international expansion such as FDI. As you might expect, the lower risk of export typically results in a lower rate of return on sales than possible through other modes of international business. In other words, the usual return on export sales may not be tremendous, but neither is the risk exporting allows managers to exercise operation control but does not provide them the option to exercise as much marketing control. An exporter usually resides far from the end consumer and often enlists various intermediaries to manage marketing activities. After 2 straight months of contraction, exports from India rose a whooping 11.64% at $25.83 billion in July in 2013 against $23.14 billion in the same month of the previous year. Disadvantages of exporting. For small and medium enterprises with less than 250 employees, selling goods and services to foreign markets seems to be more difficult than serving the domestic markets. The lack of knowledge for trade regulations, cultural differences, different languages and foreign exchange situations, as well as the strain of resource and staff interact like block of exporting. Indeed, there are some SMEs which are exporting, but nearly 2/3 of them sell in only one foreign market. The following assumption shows the main disadvantages. Financial management efforts to minimize the risk of exchange rate fluctuation and transaction process of export activity, the financial management needs more capacity to cope the major efforts. Customer demand. International customers demand more services from their vendors like startup of equipment, maintenance or more delivery services. Communication technology improvement. The improvement of communication technology in recent years enable the customers to interact with more suppliers while receiving more information and cheaper communication cost at the same time like 20 years ago. This leads to more transparency. The vendor is in duty to follow the real-time demand and to submit all transaction details. Management mistakes. The management might tap in some of the organization's pitfalls like poor selection of overseas agent or distributors or chaotic global organization. Ways of exporting. The company can decide to export directly or indirectly to a foreign country. Direct selling involves sales representatives, distributors or retailers who are located outside the exporter's home country. Direct exports are goods and services that are sold to an independent party outside of the export's home country. Mainly, the companies are pushed by core competencies and improving their performance of value chain. Direct selling through distributors. It is considered to be the most popular option to companies to develop their own international marketing capability. This is achieved by charging personnel from the company to give them greater control over their operations. Direct selling also gives the company greater control over the marketing functions and the opportunity to earn more profits. In other cases where network of sales representative and company can transfer them exclusive rights to the sell in particular geographic regions. A distributor in a foreign country is a merchant who purchases the product from the manufacturer and sells them at profits. Distributors usually carry stocks, inventory and services the products and in most cases distributes deals with retailers rather than the end users. Evaluating distributors, the size and capabilities of its sales force, an analysis of its territory, its current product mix, its facilities and equipment, its marketing policies, its customer profits, its promotional strategy, its policy against the abstract data protocols. Direct selling through foreign retailers and end users. Exporters can also sell directly to foreign retailers. Usually products are limited to consumer lines. It can also sell to direct end users. A good way to generate such sales is by printing catalogs or attending trade shows. Direct selling over the internet. Electronic commerce is an important mean to small and big companies all over the world to trade internationally. We already can see how important e-commerce is for marketing growth among exporter companies in emerging economies in order to overcome capital and infrastructure barriers. E-commerce eased engagements, provided faster and cheaper delivery of information, generates quick feedback on new product, improves customer service, access a global audience, level the field of companies and support electronics data interchange with supplier and customers. Indirect selling. Indirect exports is simply selling goods to or through an independent domestic intermediary in their own home country. Then intermediaries export the products to the consumers' foreign markets. making the export decision. Once a company determines it has exportable products, it must still consider other factors such as following. What does the company want to gain from exporting? Is exporting consistent with other company goals? What demands will exporting place on the company's key resource management and personnel, production capacity and finance, and how will these demands be met? Are the expected benefits worth the cost, or would company resource be better used for developing new domestic businesses? Export promotion. United States. The United States Department of Commerce provides United States company the opportunity to promote their products and services free of charge. To do so, Export Yellow Pages is published online and in print and is delivered to the embassies, trade centers, consulates and associations worldwide. The California Center for International Trade Development have 13 offices throughout California. Each CITD is hosted by the local community college and provides a variety of free or low-cost program and services to assist local companies in doing business abroad. These include one-on-one technical assistance and consulting, market research, training and educational programs, trade leads and special events. United Kingdom. The UK Trade and Investment, formed in 1999, is a government body that assists British companies with their exporting needs. Students, before we end, let's also understand some challenges. Exporting to foreign countries possesses challenges not found in domestic sales. With domestic sales, manufacturers typically sell to wholesalers or direct to retailer or even direct to consumers. When exporting, manufacturers may have to sell to importers who then in turn sell to wholesalers. Extra layers in the chain of distribution squeezes margin, and manufacturers may need to offer lower price to importers than to domestic wholesalers. In this episode, we have covered role of exports, scope of exports. That is all for today. Hope you have understood. We'll see you again with the next topic. Till then, take care. Bye.